Three, two, one. Hey, it's Mazzy here, and this is going to be a discussion on UK folk revival, folk rock scene, mostly 60s. I'm sure in my case, at least, it seeps into the 70s and beyond of some of the artists. And I'm with Headley in the UK, and he'll tell us exactly where in the UK he is because I forgot. And his channel, which will be linked below his, if I get this right, Another Fat Bearded Man Showing Records.
Yeah. I thought I'd go with an easy title that people could remember, so they can find me.
I was going to do another bald bearded man showing records, but I wear a hat, so nobody, until I lift it.
There don't seem to be quite as many people that fall under that fat bearded men talking about records in the VC as there used to be when I joined.
Well, there's the guy in Australia,
Dean.
Right.
Not that I want to say that he's a fat bearded man.
No,
don't put words into my mouth, Mazzy.
I mean that with all the due respect. It doesn't matter, but
sorry, Dean.
Anyway, without further ado, so we're going to showcase about 10 artist records each, go back and forth, the usual thing if you've seen these before. I'm a big fan of folk music in general, obviously American folk music, roots music. This is why I invited Headley to do this, because out of all the channels that I watch regularly, he really gets into this music a lot, American and British. He gets into the historic nature, and it's something that I really strive to learn about. I know a decent amount. I know what I love, obviously, and it's just music that just sounds great, CDs and vinyl. But, I have a few CDs here I'm showing.
There might be a few CDs here and there.
And a couple, and I think I'm going to end up with a couple of box sets that seem appropriate just to kind of...
Oh, you're just going to make me jealous, aren't you, with those?
Well, I want to show the audience, like, what some people don't want 20 John Renbourn records or Fairport Convention records.
Who are these people that don't want 20 John Renbourn records? Anyway.
Yeah, I can be theatrical like you. You got to watch his Clannad,
Clannad.
Kind of the Druids out in Stonehenge type. It's not Stonehenge, but a type of video, which is so great.
Yes, I was just being silly.
Now, let me ask you this. Let me get a little background. Are you a theater person? Is that what I heard?
Yes, I used to be. Yeah. I ended up. I worked in the theatre and as an actor, and then went into teaching. Those that can do, those that can't
do teach. And as Woody Allen says, those who can't teach Jim.
That's right. Yes.
From Annie Hall. Okay. So here we go. I always have the guests start out, and we're going to just go through it. If we come across an artist that we both are interested in and showcasing, we'll jump into that. So without further ado, Headley.
Thank you. So I'm gonna start with a bit of. I'm gonna throw ball you a googly to begin with, or throw you a curveball immediately and subvert this to my own devious ends. And I'm going to show this. This is Ralph Vaughan Williams, and this is classical music.
I know Vaughan Williams.
And he was part of a movement at the beginning of the 20th century that integrated folk music into classical music. The English music prior to that really was a bit of a laughingstock across Europe. Actually, probably people still probably say it was even then. But English composers were obsessed by German composers like Mahler, Bruckner, people like that, and that was they were just kind of copying or trying to do that. And at the same time, you had what you've heard about the folk revival. Well, the 50s was the folk revival. That was the second folk revival. The first folk revival was around the turn of the century. And basically what it did was people like Vaughan Williams, who was a very middle-class, posh English guy, and he would go around collecting folk songs. So this is I picked this one out because it's got a song called a tune called a Norfolk Rhapsody No. 1, which he went to a place called King's Lynn in Norfolk, which is where there was loads of fishermen, and he listened to their songs and he integrated their songs that he wrote down and put into that piece. And so other people did that as well. George Butterworth, who died during the First World War, and Gustav Holst, they were all doing it. So that's kind of where the sort of folk revival starts. So yeah, sorry, that's
No.
sort of like a sidestep. And also it's an interesting thing because what you've got, because I know we're going to be talking about folk rock, which is this melding of two sort of traditions almost. And that's what you have kind of with this. It's that early thing of taking the folk songs and shoving it into that classical.
So basically appropriation, taking the artists. And
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things you've got, sorry.
Paul Simon and George Harrison, and
yes,
but coming up with something new, different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, very early on, there was a guy called Cecil. Oh God, what's his name? That's really bad. Anyway, he was no, not Cecil Beaton.
Cecil B. DeMille, no.
Yeah, so Cecil Sharp, and he was one of the big kind of collecting folk songs. But what he would do is he'd go around and he wouldn't write down who told them it. He'd go, well, that's a nice tune, I'm having that. A bit like A.P. Carter did with the Carter family. And it's only later on when you get to the 60s that people start realizing, actually, we've got to start acknowledging where this has come from, because that's important to the folk music itself. Where it has come from is part of the thing.
So unlike the field recordings that Alan Lomax was doing and that whole thing in the South, the blues and the folk thing, that's obviously a different thing, because they were archivists rather than musicians. So
no, well, yeah, and we're actually I'm probably going to come mention him a bit later on as well.
Of course you are.
So yeah, so that was kind of my unofficial first one. So just sort of saying that you've got that beginning of folk music at the beginning of the 20th century, of people starting to become interested in it.
Okay, well, this is good because I'm going to be learning a lot from you, and this leads up to a lot of things I'm going to talk about. Obviously, mine are going to be from the mid 60s, around 68 really on. And before I start with the record here, I want to just showcase this book, and it's another American that kind of rips off the rest of the world, but I think in a good way he promotes the music, and that is Joe Boyd. And I'm a big fan of Joe Boyd. Was an American out of Boston who was in college in Boston. His roommate was a guy named Jeff Muldar, who had a girlfriend named Maria D'Amato, who later became Maria Muldar. You know the name if you know Midnight at the Oasis. Joe Boyd produced that record. Joe Boyd goes to England. He brings Muddy Water to England for the first time, and he's really into the blues and promoting artists and acts. And he, during the whole psychedelic period in '67, opens the UFO Club in London, produces Pink Floyd's first single. Pink Floyd was the house band. I won't tell this whole story, but this is an autobiography. And what's great about it, I would say like a third of the albums I'm going to show tonight, he has something to do with, because he produced Fairport Convention, John and Beverly Martin. He produced Incredible String Band. He produced Nick Drake. And so this is a great book called White Bicycles, an amazing autobiography about the whole British folk sing, blues sing, back and forth. He worked for Elektra Records as an A&R for the UK, back and forth.
I haven't read that. I'm going to have to seek that out, because
it's a quick read, but really interesting. So, and
he's one of those people that I can recognize his voice. He's been on so many kind of talking heads programs on the television about music that I can hear his voice and I go, it's Joe Boyd.
And of course, I used to buy his label Hannibal in the when I was getting the CDs in the 90s, all those great Hannibal reissues and original things of all this music. Anyway, I've been showing this lately because it's this is a second Pentangle album that I got. This is their first album, 1968. And what I loved about it, when I heard this one, is when I bought my first component stereo in, was it 71, I think. And they were using this as a test record. And the last song on here is called Waltz. And it's an instrumental. It's folk, jazz, blues, acoustic, just the beautiful bass on this. I just love this record. And of course, John Renbourn comes out of here, Bert Jansch comes out of here, Jackie McShee comes out of here, Terry Cox. It's just an amazing. And the same year, this album, which I think this is probably their best album, at least for my personal taste, one recorded live and one recorded in the studio. And this really mixes up this whole fusion of types of music.
And a Peter Blake cover.
Well, I was just going to say.
Sorry.
No, but that's good. Peter Blake, those of you who don't know, I always mix that Beatle connection of Peter Blake, great montage, collage artist who did Sgt. Pepper. Yeah, totally great. Good album. So anything by Pentangle, Pentangling, the name was because there was five members.
I've got that one. I've got Basket of Light. That's actually my parents' record, that one. They were into it because my parents were big folkies, so I grew up with this. In fact, I found a tape that my dad taped from the radio.
It's so great. It's so good. It's just so great and beautiful. And of course, I'll get into later Renbourn and Bert Jansch, who really come before the story here on this. But this is sort of my entry into the British folk, and this isn't even electric at this point, but it is more of the fusiony type of thing rather than the traditional folk. But
well, the interesting thing about the cover there, the black and white cover, is the original pressing, the original release, has John Renbourn and Bert Jansch's names in bold, and the rest of the band are all in sort of grey. So it's really going, these are the two guys, and the others.
Because they were the names at the time. They had put out.
Exactly, they'd had albums out already, yeah.
I didn't know that. That's good. That's interesting. I didn't know that. These are actually copies I originally got in 71 to Reprise Records in the States, so American copies. But they sound
so they're out in Reprise already in the States, were they?
Yeah, they're on Reprise in the States. They were part of, and what surprised me, and I really didn't realize this at the time, we're talking about Joe Boyd. This was produced by Shel Tamley. Shel Tamley produced early Who records, Kinks records, another American expatriate who was producing this British stuff. I think he worked with the Easy Beats, the Australian band as well, which is kind of an interesting thing because I always think of him as dark, gritty sounding record. Kinks records and early Who records are not sonic masterpieces, maybe because he didn't know how to record, loud rock and roll, and these are more sort of acoustic things. So I thought that was...
Yeah, well, they're only starting out, aren't they, with that type of music, and they're learning as they go, I suppose.
Absolutely. You hear these stories like, the Cream records aren't great recorded. These loud bands come in and just overshadow, and, these engineers that don't know how, especially in the States, and also at Abbey Road, the guys in their white lab suits were the engineers before they, suits and ties and everything. So, all right.
Okay, right. I'm just going to quickly show this. I'm going to show Ewan MacColl. This is Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger. Of course, Peggy Seeger was the half-sister of Pete Seeger, so she's American.
Didn't know that.
Ewan MacColl was, I suppose, probably the biggest figure in folk music in the 1950s and into the 60s. Also the father of Kirsty MacColl. His name actually was Jimmy Miller, but he changed his name because he was running away from the army and didn't want to get caught. He was a communist who started out as a theatre guy. He was an actor and playwright, and he used sort of agitprop theatre, so using it as a way to emancipate the working classes, and that was basically what his music was all about. And he saw folk music as being, of the people. So it was clearly that he was interested in doing that. And this has got some interesting tunes on it because he wrote, it starts off with Dirty Old Town, which of course we all know the Pogues version. Right. He wrote that. You've also got on here, The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, which...
Roberta Flack had the hit
Roberta
in America.
Flack.
Yeah,
which is bizarre to think that Roberta Flack is doing a kind of a song done by a communist folkie.
Well, they're all folk artists were communists and actors and folk artists. The Red Scare in this country, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the reasons why Alan Lomax came over, and he worked with Ewan MacColl, gathering songs. And in many ways, actually, Ewan MacColl was influenced. It's that back and forth. So you have the folk music goes out to America, and then it breeds and changes in the in the Appalachian Mountains and all over the place, and then it comes back, and you get people like Ramblin' Jack Elliott, he came over in the 50s. He was kind of before Dylan, who had a big effect.
Yeah.
And they then brought, and Alan Lomax brought all their tunes, and it was only after sort of listening to this that the British went, "What are we doing? Why are we listening to this stuff? We've got our own."
You've got,
and Ewan MacColl was interested.
Hundreds of years of great, the whole. I mean, we'll get into that a little with medieval music and all this English folk songs, traditional folk songs.
Yeah, but the interesting thing about MacColl was that the initial people like Cecil Sharp and Vaughan Williams, is they were interested in their own sort of pastoral idea of what folk music was. It's music sung by shepherds and shepherdesses in the fields when they're not shepherding and shepherding their sheep. It's that sort of thing. And so they only collected the songs that were that kind of rural, pastoral stuff, the hey nonny nonny. And Ewan MacColl was quite right in recognizing that the people who, when agriculture was failing and the Industrial Revolution started, they came to the cities and brought their songs with them, and they adapted them, and they became songs about industry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting very didactic.
No, this interests me. I find it's funny. Some of the longer videos I do here end up getting the largest views. Whether people stay throughout them, it's 50-50, and I get that.
I think this is the thing I find interesting is, when you're talking about folk music, it seems a very simple thing, but it's a very, we're talking about culture, we're talking about nationhood, there's all kinds of things, and that's why, there are people that use, we see, Ewan MacColl using it for left-wing purposes, but there are people using it for right-wing purposes and nationalism as well. So it's a really emotive subject. Billy Bragg.
I mean, obviously, we're not talking about the America thing here, but Woody Guthrie and then Pete Seeger especially, and the whole Red Scare we had here, and a lot of these people put on blacklists and things. So.
Yeah, well, the same here. I mean, Ewan MacColl was blacklisted here, as an agitator by the British government. But they also needed people to make radio programs, and so they went, "Oh, come on, let's have him then."
My earliest record, I think, and you probably know more about this record than I do, and ironically, I did not get into this album until about a year or two ago from our friend from Wales. Just moved, glasses, and I'm sorry.
Psych in the Valleys.
Yeah. And you have it. This is probably my more traditional record. I mean, I'd like you to talk about this more, but it's and I'm embarrassed to say, and I need some suggestions. I have no Davy Graham on vinyl, and I know Davy Graham. I have his music on comps, and he was probably the guitar player that influenced most of the artists that I'm going to show here. Yeah. Of course, Shirley Collins, who I believe she's still alive, or maybe not.
Yes, she had an album out, is it early this year?
Okay, but he's died like, I don't know, some years ago.
Yeah, he had a rough life. He was sort of heroin addiction at various times, and
even a musician hooked on drugs. What a concept!
What a surprise!
This is a gorgeous record, and I had heard some of the songs and things, but until Psych in the Valley showed this, tell me more about this record. This is a beautiful record.
Well, the interesting thing about this record is how different they're both bringing something different to it. You got Shirley Collins, who she was kind of discovered by Ewan MacColl. She was one of his proteges, and so she's got this wonderful. She was born in Sussex. Hastings, the Battle of Hastings. She was from Hastings, and so you can hear in her voice this lovely sort of rural twang, but what she brings to it is this very traditional. But also, actually, I should note out there are some. There's Pretty Sorrow on here, and Boll Weevil Hollow, which of course had come across from America. She actually had a thing with Alan Lomax. in the 50s when he was over here. But he went back, and then she went over in 1959 and toured round with him when he did his field recordings.
Right.
And in fact, she was with Alan Lomax when he met and recorded Mississippi Fred McDowell for the first time. You know, somebody said to them, "Oh, there's this guy, you should hear him." And they went, "No, we've got time, you know."
I don't play no
And then
rock
they
and roll.
and then they sat down and went,
play the blues.
and apparently Alan Lomax just wrote one thing in his diary. He just wrote, "Perfect." But yeah, so she brings that, and Davy Graham as a guitarist, he went to Morocco and was heavily influenced by the sound of the oud, a sort of a Middle Eastern stringed instrument, and they have that. I mean, it's that the stuff that the jazz people did with that modal sound of
well, they got into the ragas, like in America.
Well,
the people got into ragas like Sandy Bull and John Fahey. I mean, all these weird tunings and things. Maybe John Fahey wasn't really in the raga, but these weird tunings and Eastern influences that I just love that stuff.
Yeah, no, and the weird way is the way that he's doing that. He's bringing this sort of Eastern influence and playing with the guitar, while Shirley Collins is singing, you know, old 300-year-old folk songs from England, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you've also got him doing, he does a version of Blue Monk by Thelonious Monk, doesn't he? So he was heavily influenced by the jazz, and
well, that's the thing.
Just like Pentangle were as well.
Like with Pentangle, there was that heavy jazz influence that you don't normally think about with folk music, but it especially with acoustic stuff, and obviously it's like a fusion. When we hear fusion, we think of all electric John McLaughlin, Weather Report, you know, Miles Davis 70s stuff, but there's certainly a wonderful fusion of the traditional and the new, what was going on around that 67, 68 period, really.
Yeah. I mean, everyone was trying to draw from all over the place and come together in a kind of a melting pot and creating completely unique and new sounds.
Right.
You know, I mean, even bluegrass was influenced by jazz. You can't hear it quite so obviously, but you know, it's there.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a lovely record. It's just been I think it was a record store day. Because the problem with folk stuff is it's so expensive. The originals are so expensive.
I have my copy is I hate to excuse the expression, is Four Men Beards, which I think is a really shitty pressing label.
Well, apparently
label. They're out of San Francisco. This is the only pressing I could find. It's not bad, but I have, I think, 3 or 4 on their label, and I always try to get rid of them when I can, if I can find them. But, you know, I'm not that snooty about it, but I'd like to get it better. The cover's nice, though.
Oh, yeah. And this it's a great record, and people should check it out.
It's 2010, so, okay. Your turn.
Yeah, I think this was a couple of years ago, Record Store Day.
Your turn.
My turn, is it? My turn? Okay.
Even though we showed the same thing and started.
This is the Watersons. This is actually their second album. It's just called the Watersons.
Never heard of them my entire life.
Never heard of them. Now, the Watersons were from Hull, and I've got a big love of Hull because I worked there working at the college there for a number of years.
Joke. There's a Ruddles joke about the Ruddles from Hull.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, is there? Well,
go ahead.
Imagine. I think Hull you got to imagine as being. It's just like Liverpool, but on the other side of the country. So it's the port. In fact, the people who left Liverpool to come to to America, they probably, if they came across from Europe, probably first landed in Hull. Anyway, and what they do, Norma Waterson, Mike Waterson, and Elaine, known as Lal Waterson, and a friend called John, who they do this is unaccompanied, this is acapella. And they create this most amazing sound that is, it's almost like sort of slightly monastic. It has that elements from church music in there, but also really local. And they've got accents of Hull, and it's Hull is in Yorkshire, so they are from Yorkshire. It's where I am. I'm in Yorkshire. I'm in Leeds in Yorkshire.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so yeah, there's wonderful, and that's actually their first album. I've only got that one on CD, and this is called Frost and Fire, and it's that first sort of thing where you get that mixture of the very old English, that very old sort of what's the, it's slightly odd, you know. I mean, I always think that you know, if you in America you have the Deliverance, you know, that idea about mountain folk, that sort of idea about the kind of, you know, you've got to be careful of the mountain folk because
We like
the
a
hillbillies.
pig. Yeah,
And we have that here. I mean, I was perhaps going to wait until, but you have things like The Wicker Man.
Oh yeah.
Wonderful film, and it picks up on that strangeness of folk music, that idea that that you have that music that, although it has sort of Christian elements within it, it's where the Christian music had drawn from more pagan. That was the word I was after. Pagan. More paganistic roots, and you can hear that in here. And of course, Norma Waterson married a guy called Martin Carthy, which people have probably heard of. And so they record now with their daughter Eliza as Waterson Carthy. And yeah, absolutely wonderful stuff. Really check out the Watersons. It's you know, it's not easy folk. It's just honest, and it's just them. And you know, folk music to begin with was always just a cappella.
Right.
You know, so the idea of, you know, there's a big argument.
Passing the stories along too.
Well, exactly, yeah. And there's a big battle, isn't there, about folk rock and is it real folk and stuff like this. But the minute you pick up a guitar, that's not folk music. You know, there are some people that are really traditional, and yeah, that's their third album. They quit after this for a while. Strangely, Norma Waterson went off to the Caribbean to become a DJ. Doesn't sound quite in keeping with the sort of folky roots they had, but that's a lovely album called Yorkshire Garland. So yeah, I should say dates of these. We're talking about 1966.
Oh, okay. I was going to just ask that. One of these from, okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's one of those things to forget. Okay. So yeah, 1966. This first was released. Davy Graham and Shirley Collins 65. Was 64, I think.
Or 64.
65, is it?
Around, yeah, I knew that. Yeah, I didn't say that.
I knew there'd be something I'd forget to say. It's always something.
We both have to remind each other.
So yeah, Watersons.
Okay, I'm going with someone I already mentioned is Bert Jansch.
Yeah, my dad always used to say Jansch, and then I've only recently found it is actually Jansch.
It's a J. It's a hard J, and who just died 6 to 8 years ago. I'm going to show this first because there's these 2 box sets or collections. I don't have the second one because I have those individual records. And I got this because, yeah, this brings on his first album, 1965, Bert Jansch. It Don't Bother Me from 65. Jack Orion, which is a gorgeous album, black cover. And of course, Bert and John, which is the collaboration with John Renbourn and Bert Jansch. These were definitely all 4 done before Pentangle in 68. These are a great collection on Earth vinyl. And these
Earth records are marvelous. They're absolutely wonderful. The stuff they're releasing.
They're still available.
Really good value as well. They're incredible value.
Yeah. Anyway, I love this stuff. And to me, Bert is my favorite of all these guys. You know, not that I'm trying to throw them in the same thing, but if you talk about Bert and Richard, and then maybe a little later or the next year, Richard Thompson, who's still doing it. And I think I have more Richard Thompson records than any, but I find out, even though I think he's amazing, I love him, I don't listen to him as much. Most of them are on CD. I love which we'll get into later, some things about that. This is a great collection for that early stuff, very folky, instrumental and vocals. I like his voice, whereas John is not really the singer of the. But I will show this because this is probably, I'm not sure if it's his last or second to last, but this is a gorgeous record, Black Swan. Beth Orton sings on it on vocals. It took me a long time to find this on vinyl. I had the CD when it came out. This came out probably, 12 years ago-ish? I don't know, 2004. Well, more than that, God. Time goes by, right? 2004, 16 years ago. I love this record. And this first song, The Black Swan, his vocal on that, the guitar playing on this, it's just really a lovely record. So Devanda Banhart is on it. Devanda, who is on Nonsuch Records. And
nice t-shirt, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of refer to him as sort of the new Donovan. He's kind of this hippie, folky, modern artist, lived in the Bay Area, played in the Bay Area for a while, a lot. So I saw him 2 or 3 times. but very, very airy, fairy, ethereal. Like I'm a big Donovan fan, so I'm saying that with all my love of Donovan. But anyway, I'm just wanted to show this because this should be reissued on vinyl because I think it's pretty expensive to find it on vinyl. But get
Is
the
that
CD.
not part of the other collections that they released? Because they've released the 2 box sets of his first 8 records,
Right.
and then there are 2 more box sets. And
I don't
do they
know
not
what the
go up to that?
licensing, and this was originally on Drag City, which is interesting. So you
That's
think
odd.
Drag City in America? I just got, in fact, the new on Drag City, the new Bill Callahan record, which
Oh yeah, that's great.
you love you have
Gold
it.
album. Gold album.
It's so
Gold
beautiful.
record.
It's so soft and so beautiful. And of course, I love. There's a song called "Ry Cooter," which is kind of silly lyrics, but it's hysterical. So
he's got one of those beautiful voices, hasn't he? It's just sort of so deep and sort of gets into your soul.
He'll repeats a word for like 2 verses, repeating one word. So okay.
Okay, so we had Shirley Collins. This is Shirley Collins and her sister Dolly Collins, and this is Anthems in Eden, and this was released in, I think, 69. I was going to write all these down. Yeah, 69. And this is a fascinating record. There's that's Dolly. I need to say Dolly Parton. That's Dolly Parton. No, Dolly Collins and Shirley Collins. And this is a hobby ram, which is used by Morris men. So it's that sort of paganistic Englishness. And this is an incredible sounding record. It's an album recorded with a group of musicians led by a guy called David Munro, who started an early music consort and using. You were talking during your classical music 4 Corners about, I think, the poetry on vinyl. Is he another
plastic? Poetry on plastic.
Yeah, poetry was talking about the way that classical music for a long time was just recorded on modern instruments, and only recently started to be played on older instruments. And that's what you've got here. And it has this very odd sort of, it's drawing from medieval and Tudor music alongside these sort of folk tunes. Yeah, it's one of those sort of, I think, very important records in the folk oeuvre, I suppose you could say. So Anthems in Eden, yeah, beautiful mixture of weird sounds. In fact, it's one of these records, I'm not a great fan of the term acid folk, mainly because I have no problem if people want to say we're making acid folk, brilliant. It's when people go, oh, this record is acid folk, and it's like, no, it's not. I should say it's got Robin Williamson's song on here, so that's so that probably adds the acid folk.
Hippie folk. Oh, you can say hippie folk then too, is it?
Yeah,
The thing about that is there's a lot of people, especially not just in the vinyl community, but I notice it a lot, that are so into psychedelic, as I am.
Yes.
And that's such a big thing. And I joke about it on my channel because I'm older than not all the people here, but a lot of the people here. And when I was growing up, we never heard the term psych. It's psychedelic. Say the friggin' word. So everything is psych this, psych that, and this fusion of folk psych or
prog folk, and yeah, it's yeah. I mean, it's suddenly that thing of realizing, songs that I was going to say actually. So Robin Williamson was involved in this, and plays on it from the Incredible String Band, and apparently he heard Dolly playing this sort of strange organ that she plays on this. And he kind of went, I want to give you drugs. And she was like this posh, this sort of rural person going, oh, I don't want to do that kind of thing. I don't need that. I'm crazy enough as it is. So it's that sort of thing of, it's acid without the use of acid.
Okay. All right. Well, that actually leads me into this first of 2 records by John Renbourn, because it's Merry Old England and going for rootsy Merry Old England. And whenever you have, at least from an American point of view, you know it's Merry Old England when they use yay, Y-E in it, and obviously these 2 records. Now, 1970, 71, I believe, instrumental records. These are 2 records when I worked in a record store, when I first started in 73, 74. every time we played these in the store, people would buy them. People would come up and say, "What are those?" Because they didn't hear a lot of this kind of acoustic, old English folk, and it didn't sound dated in terms of 1965 dated. It just sounded, that this is obviously California where I was, San Francisco, so the hippie thing was still going on. Men had long hair. This is the one that has like Lady Goes to Church, the Earl of Salisbury, the trees, they do grow high. It's almost like Keats and Yeats poetry without the poetry musically. Just beautiful record. John Renbourn does play on this record. Oh, actually, of course he does. I mean, but also Terry Cox is on it, on some percussive, and there's flute playing on here, which makes it even more ye old merry England. This is like Renaissance fair shit that you play at the Renaissance fair at Christmas time too. But this one, I believe, is the first of the two. I can't remember now what order they came in. 63, 44, 64. This is the first of the two. I was wrong. But really great records, but they almost look like traditional records, but it is traditional, but there is a certain in the moment time of 1969, 1970. It's like singer-songwriters without the singers in a way, but just really nice stringed instruments, not just the guitar. Although,
well, does it use any of those? Because I know that John Renbourn was introduced to sort of medieval and Tudor music by his classical guitar instructor.
Good question on that. I know he goes into some Bach on here, so there's some classical overtones on this. Dave Swarbrick and John Renbourn and Terry Cox and yada yada.
The usual suspects.
Yeah, they're all just playing these things together. Scarborough Fair. So you listen to this stuff. Now, I didn't say this before. I probably should have with John Renbourn and all these guys. You started hearing appropriations later with Led Zeppelin records.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you hear this riff. Now, if you start listening to John Renbourn, you start thinking, wait a second, did he take that from Led Zeppelin? You realize it's 4 years earlier or something. So there's that. But again, there's my two guitarists from Pentangle.
Yeah, so picking up on that ye olde England, in fact, this is Tim Hart and Maddie Pryor. Now, they would go on, this was recorded, I think, they recorded two. I'm going to get away with two of these, so Volume 1 and Volume 2. And these were released, I think they was recorded in sort of 68, 69, I think. And their original covers were those, and those are very expensive now. But Tim Hart and Maddie Pryor went on to form Steeleye Span.
Steeleye Span.
Exactly, and this is what they were doing before it. So when they were involved, getting into, I think they got together in 1966, playing around the same. In fact, Tim Hart went to the same sort of school as the Zombies, the rock band the Zombies.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Odyssey and Oracle and
exactly. So he comes out of that same sort of area, and these are lovely. And as you can see with these covers, they've gone for this kind of tapestry, these represses. So they're picking up on this ye olde, and what year are these again? Olde England.
What year are these again?
So this is, I think, 68 and 69. I think. Got it. So yeah, and these are on Mooncrest represses, and yeah, this is very simple stuff. It's just some acapella stuff, just the singing between the two of them, picking up on the old songs. This is the thing about folk music, that for purists, the idea is that folk music is, as I think you said, Mazzy, earlier, it's something that's passed on. It has that continuity. In fact, Cecil Sharp talked about three things for a folk song. He talked about continuity, i.e. it has a history. 2, selection, meaning that only the good stuff gets sung and remembered, because all the crap stuff, people go, no, I'm not going to sing that. And then there's variation. So you'll go around the country, or even to America or to Ireland, and the same songs are sung, but they'll be slightly different. Maybe
different versions, slightly different melodies, maybe lyric.
Yeah. I've actually got a fascinating record by Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger, which takes 4 folk songs and then plays a Scottish version, an English version, an American version, and a sort of, you know, maybe another one. And so it's showing you that. And so that's what they're doing here. They're drawing from ye olde English songbook, as it were. And they're really worth picking up. So they did 2 albums of those before Steeleye Span. And then they did a 3rd one, which this is I bought this one.
I've seen that one. That's the only one.
That's the American cover, which again, it looks like some sort of medieval sort of ye olde knights and minstrel, isn't it? It's great.
I think I might have to name this video "Ye Old English Folk Music." You know,
yes, it's called Summer Solstice, and this is from like 71. Yeah. But the annoying thing for a record collector is these 2 are Tim Hart and Maddie Pryor, but then this one is Maddie Pryor and Tim Hart, and I don't know where to file it.
You know what my friend the archivist always says, who do you think of first? That's how you file it. Don't overthink it. Where do you go? You know, I just finally realized I had my Bill Callahan records under C, and I had Smog records under Smog, and it's the same guy. So, I mean, that's an obvious thing, even though they didn't call him Bill Callahan. He went by the name of Smog. So they're all under Callahan now.
And where do you keep your Jethro Tull records? Under J for Jethro or T for Tull?
Under J, because it's the band. Yeah.
Or Cat Stevens under S for Stevens.
Or Dr. John. Okay, is it under? Yeah. If it's under Doctor, is it DR or DO? Okay.
What about Alice Cooper when they were first a band, or when it was named after him? Very confusing.
No, that's a good. I keep it under C. But anyway, I'm so glad you brought up Maddie Pryor, because in the mid-'70s, I forget exactly what year, maybe you can tell me, and I tried to turn people onto this record. To me, it's one of the most beautiful vocal English records I own. And I see it around relatively cheap. Mine's an original UK Chrysalis, and it's this record, The Silly Sisters. It opens up with Dolphin Mistress. Oh my God, it's like this English Irish lilt a little bit. Lint, is that how you? It's lilt? A ye old song, and it's these 2. This is like the most bizarre friggin' cover. It's not a very flattering cover, but this, to me, this whole album to me is literally a perfect record from start to finish. There's a great acapella song, mostly acapella. My husband's got no courage in him. And you just see these 2 women, like, I mean, this is from a ye old British film, folk, like, you know, this would, you know, the Robin Hood episodes where they're singing in the pub, if they're even let in the pub. These are the 2 wenches in the pub. And I mean that with all due respect, and I'm not being misogynist here. Beautiful record. Mid-70s.
So it's with June Tabor. It's June Tabor as well, isn't it?
I'm sorry, yeah. Maddie from Steeleye Span, and June Tabor, who I absolutely love also. They made a more refined, about 10 years later, version of Silly Sisters 2.
Sensible cover.
Yeah, exactly. They like, you know, I think they're, you know, going for their law degree job interview with this one. 1988, but this one, I just love this record. It just hit me. Again, this was a record we played in the record store. Every time I played it, people would ask about it. They hated the cover, but we'd sell copies just by playing it because it's just really beautiful. Photography by Mick Rock. There you go. Okay. So anyway, there's my Maddie Pryor and June Tabor. Great. I love June Tabor.
Well, when you said choose 10 records, I found choosing 10 is just so difficult.
It's whatever it is. Yeah.
I just want to go on for hours about, and I nearly chose a June Tabor record actually. But that is a great record. Okay, I'm going to, for the 3rd time, I'm going to show Shirley Collins. But each one of these records by her I've shown are stylistically, so far apart. This is Shirley Collins and the Albion Country Band. This was released in 1971, and this is she married Ashley Hutchins from Fairport Convention and Steeleye Span, and because after leaving Fairport Convention, Ashley Hutchins was going in a direction of more traditional. He kind of felt that they'd gone so far with the you've got that there, man.
I just realized.
You just realized
it got misfiled. This was okay.
That's that.
Okay, this was supposed to be with the Silly Sisters right after it, but I just realized it. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
that's fine. No, because it's a much nicer cover, isn't it? Than
yeah, this is a 1991.
Is that a collection of both the albums?
Is it?
It's
okay.
One of those, isn't it?
This is the 1991 UK pressing.
Yeah, it's one of those. I don't know.
It's not the American. It's
no.
Mooncrest Records, Camden Road, London, 1991. Sorry about that.
That's fine. I'm glad to know you got it.
We're improvising.
Excellent. Yeah. So he was going more traditional, and so teaming up with his wife Shirley Collins, they record this album. And I don't know if you can see, I'm probably not going to be able to see all those names on it, but basically I'll read some of them out. It's so the Albion Country Band is Lal Waterson and Mike Waterson, I showed earlier from the Watersons. Royston Wood from a group called The Young Tradition, who are another vocal group. You've got Richard Thompson, Maddie Pryor, Simon Nicol, Ashley Hutchins, Barry Dransfield, Nick Jones. Yeah, it's a who's who of folk, English folk and folk rock. And it's the time when Shirley Collins is mixing her traditionalism with more of that rocking sound that Fairport and Steeleye Span did. And the interesting thing, this cover is there's a lion. There should have been a unicorn that would have been off the picture here, and it was taken at a place called Eltham Palace, which is sort of southeast London, and it's a medieval and Tudor palace, but inside it had an extension, an Art Deco extension in the 1920s. And I think they're trying to say something about the place, that what they're saying is that building draws from both, the ancient history of medieval and Tudor times, and they've updated it. And that's kind of what they're doing with folk, is that they're putting it alongside. And as I said earlier, the idea of the minute you play a tasteful acoustic guitar, it's no longer the way it was originally done. So let's throw out the window how folk should be done. Exactly. Folk can be done in any way.
Right.
And there's a lovely picture on the back, actually. This is a photograph that the guy that that's a guy that Cecil Sharp photographed in about 1906. That photograph was taken, and it's one of the guys that he took songs from. So that's an interesting. There's a lovely gatefold that I don't have.
That's probably like a daguerreotype or something, or a tintype.
Yeah, probably early stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, if you like Fairport Convention and Steeleye Span, that is a must for you. And Shirley Collins has such a delicate voice. I mean, I was meant to say, you showed the Silly Sisters. It seems to me that folk music and folk rock the men bring. They're the guitarists, that they're the fiddle players. So Swarbrick is the fiddler. You've got Bert Jansch and Martin Carthy. They are the arch guitar players, the troubadours almost. And for the women, it's the voices.
Yeah.
So, and they're all different. So, they've all got something unique about them. And Shirley Collins has a very unaffected, natural, innocent voice.
What I like about that Silly Sisters record, even though it's this beautiful women vocals, and I say this with all the due respect too, those two women have balls on that song. They're really in a way, they feel like they just got screwed over by some assholes, some men, which I know they're not singing all about that, but my husband's got no balls is like what they're thinking about. But it's just really it's an intense record in a certain way, but yet beautiful and feminine at the same time, if that makes any sense. But
well, I find June Tabor, her voice is quite, I find it quite scary.
it's lower. It's lower.
It's a lower sound. It's kind of more serious almost.
Yeah.
And so when she sings things, she brings something completely different to it. That's what they all do, don't they? They all bring something different.
Totally. I'm going with my very favorite of the English folk rock bands, and it's considered in theory, the first English folk rock band, maybe, Fairport Convention. Now, okay, any of you out there that aren't into folk rock, in my opinion, this is by far the best folk rock album of any folk rock record. Now, I'm not throwing the Byrds, the American, folk rock. That's a whole different thing, adding, drums and bass on Sounds of Silence by Simon & Garfunkel. Not the same thing. Organically, the musicians, obviously, Richard Thompson, I'd say, to me, bang for the buck, and I'm going to get into her as we get along, the most beautiful voice, maybe ever even, is Sandy Denny. And I'm going to get a little bit into her after this, but the songs on here, Come All Ye, here we go, we got a ye again.
There you are, yeah.
Come All Ye Faithful. I mean, the way this opens up, and these folk songs, but there's like a rock and roll, it's not rock and roll like what people think of rock and roll, Van Halen or Eddie Cochran or even or Rolling Stone. It's not that at all. But there's definitely this rock mixed in, and obviously Richard Thompson's guitar playing. To me, a perfect record by far. This is the record before it, as I recall, right?
On Half Bricking.
It's her second record, I think.
Third album.
This is the third. Okay, see, I needed a real guy from Yorkshire here. Did you bring the pudding?
No, I haven't.
That's such a bullshit American thing to say. We go for the cliches because we don't have the history like you do, or know.
Well, I can make you some Yorkshire pudding if you want some.
No, it's okay. I think it. Okay, I'm not going to even do the accent. Anyway, I love this. Isn't this Sandy Denny's mother and father? I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. I just love this cover. Right.
To me, it's wonderful.
I think her biggest mistake was leaving them, and then she came back, but that's a whole other story we get into. Love these records. I don't know what else anything to say about this.
I love the gatefold. I love that the gatefold is wonderful, because I mentioned Cecil Sharp. There's a picture of Cecil Sharp in here with a little bit of telling about his folk song collecting, and it's a collection of various people. You've got Francis J. Child, who was an American professor who in the 1880s started to collect English and Scottish folk ballads. So, so that weird thing of it needed an American to tell us that we should be looking after our own folk music. Yeah. Just in the same way that it needed the Beatles and the Stones to go to America and say, hey, this blues music.
You don't know what you have till it's gone. It's not in your own backyard. There's so many lyrics. While we're there, I'm going to throw in this just because.
Oh, nice.
This is the first 10 years CD box set, unreleased stuff, live stuff, the stuff from the albums, gorgeous box set. And, this is where CDs excel in a certain way. And I'm not a vinyl purist always. Just, I like the history, the artifacts, the books, the story, everything else, I like to sit and read while I'm listening to my ye old record collection. And of course, I'll just throw in this.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so Fairport Convention, next.
Right, I'm going to show this. Now, one of the things I find kind of interesting is we always talk about English folk, Scottish folk, Irish folk, and Welsh always seems to be left out of the question, really. Not that this is what you would call Irish folk. This is a guy called Dave Evans, The Words in Between. And Dave Evans, he's a Welshman, and this was recorded in '71. This is a recent pressing. I always think he looks slightly like a young Richard Thompson. Very odd. Anyway, And he's a guitar picker, so he's a bit, he's obviously influenced by John Fahey and John Renbourn and Bert Jansch. But he's also a bit of a troubadour, a bit like Nick Drake. And in fact, this has got, oh gosh, I can't remember now. Sorry. Who's the guy is it Kirkman, who did the Nick Drake orchestral work, the string section and stuff.
Oh God, who played the, yeah. I know John Cale worked on that, but
yeah.
He played.
But anyway, so he does some of the orchestral stuff on here. And if you like Bert Jansch and if you like Nick Drake, somewhere in that sort of folky troubadour guitarist Venn diagram is Dave Evans. It's really worth listening to. It's a bit of a rarity, although it's one of those records that actually even originals don't go for a huge amount, which is strange. But yeah, again, that's on that Earth records we were talking about that did the Bert Jansch stuff.
I don't even know where they're from. I don't know the history of them.
No, I think it started with something to do with releasing Bert Jansch's stuff.
Because they're continuing putting these collections out.
I might be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know that.
They are certainly one that I will buy anything by them these days. So yeah.
Sandy Denny, again, her voice to me is sublime, but she teams up with Trevor Lucas, Jerry Donahue, Jerry Conway, and Pat Donaldson for a one-off, which is a gorgeous record too, Father and Gay. I think there was a song they did called Father and Gay, right?
That's right, that Fairport did. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that Fairport did. This is a perfect record. In the States, it came out on A&M Records. This is an original copy I got when it came out. So this is, I'm thinking 72, probably. Again, it's too bad these things didn't last. And obviously, if you have read the story of Sandy Denny, she's had alcohol problems and a little tempestuous, never satisfied in a certain way, would keep looking for something else, which is too bad because Fairport was doing really well. This, for a short time, did well. Unfortunately, I never saw any incarnation of either of them live. I don't even know if they even toured the States. I would doubt it, but I don't know.
But I think you've got to remember that Fairport were involved in a really bad van accident.
That's right.
Just after the release of Unhalf Bricking. I forgot about that. That's when they went to convalesce and did Legion Leaf, and I think for Sandy Denny, I think although she wasn't in the van, her and Trevor Lucas were driving. From the next to the next gig. So traumatic,
and then started drinking. And again, I forgot to mention, Legion Leaf was produced by Joe Boyd, who I was referring to as is, I think this is too. Following.
Yes. Well, actually, I'm not sure about that. I don't know.
I
don't actually have that one. I have got I've got the Sandy Denny box set, which is
produced by Joe Boyd.
Some stuff on there.
Produced by Joe Boyd. So Joe Boyd, really kind of comes in. I have more things with Joe Boyd. So Father and Gay, highly recommended record. I love this record.
Yeah, Father and Gay Castle. It was where Mary Queen of Scots was held before she was executed, and that's what the song Father and Gay is all about. It's all about Mary Queen of Scots.
I love this history lesson. Seriously, this is great. I love this.
My turn. Right. Okay. Anne Briggs. Now, Anne Briggs. Do you know Anne Briggs? Do you know Anne Briggs? Anne Briggs is, for me, you said Sandy Denny. Anne Briggs is the folk voice for me. She was early on in the 60s. She went out with Bert Jansch for a while, and in fact, this is her first record, released in '71. And it starts off with Black Waterside, which is the song that Bert Jansch does. Is it on Jack O'Ryan? I can't remember. And then, of course, that gets changed by Led Zeppelin into Black Mountain Side. Is it?
Black Mountain.
And it was Anne Briggs who taught it to Bert Jansch. So that's she was a folky. A lot of this record is traditional. It's released, I should have said, released on Topic. And Topic was probably the big folk. There's two, basically in the UK, there are two big folk labels, and that's Topic and Transatlantic. And I think Transatlantic was,
Pentangle.
Renbourn was all
even
on
the Warner Brothers
yeah.
says Transatlantic reprise.
But Topic was created. Topic is the oldest independent record label in the world, still going. It's just done 80 years. And it was an offshoot of the sort of a communist pamphlet makers, and it was the idea of pushing socialist messages through music. But they're still going, and this is wonderful. It's mostly a cappella. It's mostly her just singing, unadorned. She's got the most wonderful voice, and like we were saying about all the female singers have very unique, different, distinct voices. Hers has an ancient authority to it, I feel, anyway. And so she did that in 1971. And in the same year, she comes out, and this is on CBS. And so this is The Time Has Come. Now, this is only a repress, because this is one of those records that, you know, is £800 for an original or something like that. And this is, whereas the other one was mostly traditional, and she had written maybe one or two, this is almost entirely more modern, her songs and songs by other people. And if you like Nick Drake, you need this in your collection. If you think Nick Drake is great,
I'm there.
Love Anne Briggs. This is beautiful.
I would appreciate in the next few days, when you ever have 5 minutes, return an email to me with the names of the top 3 or 4 or 5 that you think I should have. Because I don't know if
it'll be a 5-volume epistle.
That we showed. Of course, I could go through and write these down, but if you feel like
certainly, yeah. So a wonderful record. Very much Nick Drake influence. It's very simple. She played the bouzouki. She was taught how to play the bouzouki by a guy called Johnny Moynihan, who was in Sweeney's Men, which were an Irish group with Andy Irvine that would end up going into Planxty.
Sounds like a mob.
So yeah, there's that real connection. All of these records I'm showing have got some sort of collection.
Oh, I'm sure.
And she did those two. She did an EP. She did some tracks on the odd sort of compilation prior to this. She did those 2 albums, and then she was recording a third when she was pregnant, and it just didn't go well, and it was kind of scrapped. And this was finally released in '96. So it was recorded in I think 74, and it's finally been released in '96. This is the modern, newer one. I hate the cover, actually. I think it's an awful.
Yeah. Is it any good? Is the music any good?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Again, it's that wonderful sort of pastoral folk blending of traditional, but also looking to the more kind of troubadour kind of Nick Drakey. I hate using him as a kind of a touchstone, but
that's a funny thing, because I don't know. I did not pull Nick Drake for this because it seems the obvious one. I don't know if you did, but you got to admit, I remember, again, 1973, 74, having some of those Nick Drake records in the store I worked in. I never remember ever selling one. He had such a small following, and of course he didn't sell records really. And the story is, everyone knows, in 1999, Volkswagen uses the pink moon on a commercial, all the power to it, and Nick Drake becomes a sensation, 30 years after he's dead or something. And
I hadn't heard about him until about 95, because as I said, I grew up with a very folky background.
I remember seeing
my
those
mum
records.
Still goes to the folk club every
I saw
Friday.
Those records all the time, and I never listened to them.
Well, Joe Boyd says a very interesting thing about why we've connected to Nick Drake now. Is he talks about how, because Nick Drake didn't sell any records during the 60s and into the 70s, nobody remembers him. There's no memory of that music. So whereas things like, the Beatles and other 60s music that we've lived with for 50 years, or more, people were discovering Nick Drake, and there was no shared memory. There was no sense of, who is this guy? Oh, I remember that guy.
No repressed baby boomer memories, nothing. Everyone got into him at the same time. And it was really just a kind of a easy sound without being middle of the road. I thought
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Well, he was heavily influenced by. He was very sort of cerebral. He was very interested in the sort of the romantic poets, you know,
Right. Just
Shelley and Coleridge.
ultimately shy, and couldn't perform live, and
No,
uh,
no.
you know. So
Well, there's
all right.
interest. Yeah, I've only got a couple more. I've got a couple more. Is that
Okay, no, we're good. I got a
we
box
good?
set now. I got a box set. I'm
Okay.
going with Sandy Denny, the most beautiful voice in the world. This
Apart from Anne Briggs, of course.
1985, aside from her, but even she's one notch up. Tempestuous Life. I don't get into the personal stuff, but this combines, overview. This is on 1985 Hannibal Records, so it's a Joe Boyd compilation. Has Fairport Convention, has solo stuff. Some of her solo stuff got a little affected, I think, where it was a little too pretty, not great arrangements, but some of it is wonderful. There's some live stuff in here, recorded in Los Angeles with Fairport Convention, a cover of Knocking on Heaven's Door, but it's got, from Legion Leif, Farewell, 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 which is just a perfect song. It has, let's see. Anyway, she does a version here, a live version with Linda Thompson of, or duet, When Will I Be Loved, Everly Brothers song, around the time Linda Ronstadt made it a big hit too. This is actually, Sandy Denny is one of Linda Ronstadt's favorite vocalists, I heard from a source, but beautiful, beautiful. I would say, this is probably too much for most people, of Sandy Denny and some of the stuff, but it's
like probably that box set as well.
This is 4 records, has a beautiful book, but again, I would go for, Legion Leaf
I think.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And the one with her
North Star Grassman and the Ravens.
that one, and the one with
her
the
best.
close-up of her face. God.
Yeah. So
Tragic end to a beautiful.
Yeah, that's got
book.
her doing Black Waterside. So you know that we're talking about that idea about folk songs being passed down. You have Anne Briggs discovering it from Cecil Sharp House in the archives, and then she teaches it to Bert Jansch, and then Bert Jansch kind of teaches it to Sandy Denny. So it's that passing it along, which is
I just love her voice.
Yeah. Okay, this is Steve Ashley, Stroll On. And Steve Ashley was one of those sort of people that was in and around the folk scene for quite a while. I've already showed records that he was on. He was on that last Anne Briggs recording, actually. He was in a short-lived group called Ragged Robin.
This is probably the most incestual video of any video that.
Yeah. Oh, everything's connected.
Everyone's related. Everyone.
Oh yeah, we are. We all are.
Yeah. There's probably like love children from all these people from back in the.
I'd like you to meet my mother and my sister. One person.
My mother, my daughter, my mother.
Yeah. And yeah, it was voted at the time. This is 74. It was released. Actually, it was recorded in 71, but he took it around. He couldn't get it released. And actually, he eventually gets released on Gull Records.
That's surprising, because that's right in the midst of the singer.
Oh yeah, I know. Maybe they were getting scared that they thought the bubble was bursting. Huh. But in America, well, actually, I'm not sure. Is this an American one? Yeah, I think this is an American copy, and it was released by Motown Records.
Wow.
Because of course, they're a big releaser of folk music.
Yeah. And I think aside from Rare Earth, they've never released a white person's record ever, I think.
Well, yeah. So this is a subsidiary distributed by Motown Corporation. So yeah, this is, I think if you listen to anything by them, the first track on here, Fire and Wine, which Anne Briggs did on her second album. And it starts with this kind of chant, this monastic chant, and you're in for something interesting with this.
I've seen fire and I've seen wine.
Yeah,
that's Fire and Rain.
Yeah. I'm not sure if James Taylor got I think he'd already done it. Yeah, beautiful record. It's got all kinds of people on it. You got Dave Mattox, Simon Nicol, Dave Pegg, Danny Thompson, Royston Wood, yeah, Ashley Hutchins, BJ Cole, who's a pedal steel guitar player, plays on it. So it's a bit of everything. And yeah, if you like your folk rock with a bit more rock, check it out. It's kind of got, I mean, the cover sort of says it. It's that kind of slightly psychedelic, weird kind of stuff going on, giant dogs and things.
I didn't include that. Reminds me of like 70s, like Al Stewart record covers.
Yeah, yeah. It does.
Was about the
it?
fantasy folk, airy fairy stuff.
Steve illustration by a guy called Kenneth Laidlaw. I don't think I know anything else by him, but yeah.
You know, it's great. We're having this conversation about, you know, folk music and new folk in the early 60s, mid 60s, and then the folk rock thing. To me, for my taste, there was a danger in the 70s where some of this folk stuff got, to me, and I don't know even how to describe this, but the wrong kind of rock and roll added to the folk. And I don't know if that's one of them because I haven't heard it, but it almost was, it did, like, to me, Fairport, the rock side of it became a little more organic, naturally, even when maybe James Taylor got a little rocky, which didn't happen very often, but with Danny Kortchmar, of course, he had for years. There's something sometimes, or Tim Buckley went through this period too, and I like Tim Buckley a lot. He did this rock and roll thing that I totally get why some of his stuff is not accessible to some people, because it's really out there in this rock and stuff. Although one of my favorite Tim Buckley records is Greetings from LA, which is a funk record in a way, and a soul record, and his voice, it's just, I know I'm kind of going into a whole different direction now, but that reminds me of that whole thing that was really dangerous then. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think there is a point where, you know, as you go through the 70s, the rock elements, and they go in different directions, and you get into that whole folk prog, you know, bands like Genesis, and, you know, of
course,
if you like Genesis, brilliant, but they were, you know, they were folky to begin with. They had very folk influences.
Absolutely.
You know, Jethro Tull, obviously.
Jethro Tull, yeah.
You know, yeah, great.
Okay, 2 records here. Another Joe Boyd collection, and another married couple that couldn't last for a while is John and Beverly Martin. These are good records. Now, I got into these after the fact because I got into John Martin because of May You Never. That great. I mean, it's probably
Solid Air. Yeah.
Solid Air, which is an interesting fusion of folk and jazz and like weird guitar noises and stuff.
Yeah,
and one of the best
it?
shows I ever saw, I think it was just after that album. What year was that? 72-ish or so. But I saw at Winterland in San Francisco an Island Records bill, and it was, the opening act was John Martin, acoustic, and he was amazing. So I went back and bought that album and got into May You Never. The middle act was Free, Paul Rodgers and Free, and the headliner was Traffic, the 73 Traffic with Rebop Kwaku Ba. And that's another thing of the folk. I love John Barleycorn Must Die. I did not include them, but especially that album. That's like their folk rock record. But these records—
well, they learned it from the Watersons. It was the Watersons that probably did it.
That's good for me to check that. Again, beautiful records. This is 70, 71, I think, give or take. And then, of course, the record company wants John Martin, or maybe this is 69, 70, wants John Martin to be a singer-songwriter, because that's what's happening. And they wanted him solo. And he never really made it, at least in the States, solo. He made a shitload of records. And for a long time, I was buying every record he made. One of my favorite records, the only thing I'll end with John, in terms of John Martin, in the, I think it was the 90s or the 2000s maybe, he did a record called Church with One Bell. And I only have it on CD. It's on my Discogs wish list, and it goes for like $500 or some crazy amount.
Ridiculous, isn't it?
The CD's fine. And he's doing cover songs. And the thing is, the label wanted him to do that record to buy him that church, which seems kind of weird that must have been a cheap church, really, when you think about it. And he does a version of Strange Fruit, the song that, Billie Holiday recorded. It's such a beautifully recorded record, low bass, that low voice he has. and slow and jazzy and moody. And it's a gorgeous record, Church with One Bell. Highly recommended. Not folk at all, really, but just a gorgeous record. And I would die to have that on vinyl.
Yeah, well, he's another Scot that is sort of doing that folky thing, you know, like Bert Jansch, what Jansch was, you know, and there's there were a couple of people I didn't show, like Archie Fisher, who was one of the people that taught Bert Jansch how to play. You know, they're big, you know, these big names, and Dick Gocken.
Yeah,
I know he worked with Billy Bragg, so, but you know, that's another one I didn't have time to show. My final record, I think we're there. Is this. Now, this is later. This is from 1980, I think. 1980? Yeah. This is Nick Jones, Penguin Eggs. And Nick Jones, I've already showed records that he was on. He was on that Albion Country Band album. And he did a lot of session playing. He also played the fiddle. But an incredible guitarist. He's another one of those. He wanted to be Hank Marvin when he was growing up. And couldn't afford an electric guitar, so ended up having to get an acoustic guitar.
No Fender Jazzmaster or Jaguar, huh? No.
And yeah, he released, I think fourth album, or maybe no, 4 albums from about 70 or 71 on through the 70s, and each one of those is, you know, these 300-pound records that have not been repressed, which I never understand why. I always wanted to know why some of these records aren't, whether there's a contractual thing or whether the artists don't want it.
I can't imagine the artists not wanting it, but yeah, yeah.
But so this is 1980, Penguin Eggs,
okay.
And this is an album that it starts with, he's a guitar player. Yeah, so if you like your guitar players, guitar pickers like Bert Jansch and John Renbourn, he's another one that's great. There's a whole lot of them, you know, and he does this amazing thing where he plays the guitar and he sings completely different things. I don't know how he does it. It's that kind of, you know, doing that. You know, he'll be doing a backing on doing a rhythm on the guitar, which is going completely counterpoint to what he's doing vocally, and it's an incredible folk record, but it sounds unfolk. You know, if folk, kind of that idea of traditional folk really turns you off, I would say give this a go. He starts with a song called Canada-I-O, which Bob Dylan did on one of his 90s records or 2000, early, anyway. And he says, traditional song arranged by Bob Dylan. No. Arranged by Nick Jones. So yeah, beautiful record. He unfortunately, so he released it in 1980. In 1984, he was involved in a hideous car accident. He was driving back from a gig, and they say he literally broke every bone in his body. Was unable to play, so he's not released. He didn't release a single album after that. So this is his last recorded record in 1980. I know that about 8 years ago or so, he went on stage again for the first time with his son playing guitar. Wow. But yeah, a real lost. I mean, he's probably one of those people that had he still continued playing, and he would be up there, sort of, you know, that we remember, like Bert Jansch, and you know. But yeah, so check him out, Nick Jones, Penguin Eggs, 1980. But it doesn't sound like a 1980s record. Okay. It sounds like a 1960s, you know, 70s record.
That's a real uplifting final record to show. Hadley. Story. I love that story. My final artist, and then I got a quick bonus at the end. Just
I have bonuses as well.
I can. We can have bonuses, yeah. And what a surprise. I'm going to show a record produced by Joe Boyd.
And who's he? Sorry.
And it's the last record these two did, album as a couple, and that's Shoot Out the Lights, Richard and Linda Thompson. To me, this is a perfect record. They were going through like hell, divorce, and I actually saw them very close to around this time at a club in San Francisco, the Great American Music Hall. And you can you could cut the ice, you know, the tension in the room there. They were great. I've seen Richard Thompson so many times. It's the only time I saw Linda. The song that I remember hearing on actually FM radio in San Francisco played "Shoot Out the Lights," and especially "Did She Jump or Was She Pushed?" You almost wonder if that's about the couple's relationship,
Well,
obviously.
that whole album is, I think.
Oh,
I mean, look at the cover. Look at him there, and she's a picture on the wall.
this is a total breakup record.
Yeah.
But Dave Maddox is on it, Pete Zorn, Dave Pegg, Simon Nicole. It's a great record. There's something about this record. It's just wonderful. They made a bunch of records, and what I'm going to show here is this box set that just came out. And
I said I was going to feel really jealous when you showed all these boxes.
yeah, Richard and Linda Thompson, Hard Luck Stories, 72 to 82. This was put together by Andy, forgot his last name. No, actually, that's Right Side Up.
Oh,
it's a reflection of
it's a
reflection in the water. So
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Same guy that put this box set together, Andy, I forgot his last name, with a B, put together the great 8 CD box set last year of Bobby Gentry.
Bobby Gentry.
Now, just for you, if you order this, it's only, for some reason, there's a bullshit licensing thing, because they couldn't release this in the United States. This is Universal Music, because this in the United States is licensed by Warner Brothers. So you think they could negotiate this shit. So I had to order this from the UK, and it took forever. Compounded on that, if you go on the forums, and I had some issues. Actually, my CD player played it fine. Half the CD players are not playing these discs. Half the people can't burn the stuff on their computers. So there's an email address by mid-November. If you find this, you have to send an email. Universal's going to repress the CDs, and they'll send you a WAV download code. However, this is all the records plus a beautiful book, and I won't show it upside down, but oh, their son Teddy Thompson has made
he's great, yeah,
made great records too. But Richard and Linda Thompson made some wonderful records together. They got involved in this sort of Sufi type religious cult, depending on how you want to talk about it. I'll say it, but love this record. I mean, love this these two artists together. They made some wonderful records. So Richard and Linda Thompson, of course, Richard from Fairport Convention, and a lot of great solo records. You want to do one little bonus one, and then I'll close off?
I'll do a bonus. I was just going to say a collection that if anyone sees is really worth picking. Hey!
Perfect ending. Perfect ending. Oh, okay. Get hold of the light. Let's do our thumbnail here. Okay.
Yeah. Have you read the? I haven't. Unfortunately, the book that accompanied this is really difficult to get, and I haven't got a copy.
I remember looking through it. I got this record again when I worked in a record store. This is oh no, I forgot what year this came out.
I like the way they go across the bridge with the.
This is, if you can find this, there's a CD version of it or the LP box set.
There's also a second volume, isn't there? There's a second volume. I think that's only available.
Right. I don't have the second volume. This would be a great overview of everything we talked about here. Now, you're not going to have all the musicians.
Yeah.
But you're going to have.
Yeah. Could do with the track listing on the back, couldn't we?
Yeah, you're going to have the Dubliners, the Chieftains, Fairport Convention, John Martin, Leadbelly,
Davy Graham,
Steeleye Span,
Bert Jansch,
Jack the Lad,
Martin Carthy, Pentangle, Shirley Collins, Davy Graham, what we showed,
Al
it's
Stewart.
all on there.
Yeah, the new Humble Bums. I have no idea who they are, but
that's Do you not know who they are?
No, I don't.
That's Baker Street guy. What's his name?
Rafferty.
Jerry Rafferty, and Billy Connolly.
Oh, Billy. Oh, okay. I did know that. Out of context, Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these groups that morphed into, obviously we mentioned Al Stewart had a big hit with Year of the Cat, and of course Jerry Rafferty with Baker Street in '78, and all that stuff. And of course, a lot of this stuff was pulled back when the punk thing was happening in the late '70s. But then again, an artist that I think we both love a lot, and I did a whole feature with my friend the archivist, is Billy Bragg. And I remember seeing him. I had no idea who he was. He opened up for Echo and the Bunnymen. and people were ready for Echo, and he came out with just that one guitar, and people were kind of didn't give a shit. All of a sudden, the first song, they were dead quiet, and he just like a punk folk troubadour, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and he's great. You go and see him live, and I enjoyed seeing him live, partly for the chat in between the songs. You know, he's very much very political, and but he also does beautiful sort of love songs, doesn't he? You know,
absolutely.
he
His
is an
last few
all-round.
albums are more acoustic based than that, and I like the Train album he did with Joe Henry.
Yes. Yeah.
I just played that the other day, but you know, that's a different kind of thing, but still a tradition. I mean, he's obviously the album he did with Wilco on the
Mermaid Avenue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Headley.
So just finally, I just want to say, if anyone's interested, you've shown your book, I'll show my book. This is, you show yours, I'll show you mine. This is Electric Eden by Rob Young, and it's called Unearthing Britain's Visionary Music. I tell you what, I thought you might have shown some incredible string band, but no, if you are at all interested in English folk, English music, yeah, this is an incredible read. Really, really well written. Like I said, you know, the best music books are also something about society. They're also about cultures and people.
And Billy Bragg has written some great books, including a skiffle book on the history of that. So
yeah,
there's a link below here, or by the time you see this Sunday, it's Sunday for you, unless you're watching this 5 years from now, to Headley's channel, a lot of Roots stuff, other stuff too. So check it out. Thanks, Headley, for doing this. I love this music, and I learned.
Yeah.
Thanks
for having me on, and thanks for letting me dictate and talk nonsense. And yeah.
Ye old pagan English folk revival rock music. I'm going to shorten the title, but it's something like that. You guys know before we do, because we don't know yet.
No.
Mazzy loves you. Good night, and God bless.
Bye-bye.
Take care.